Welcome to the Worship Ministry Training Podcast, a monthly podcast for worship leaders who are serious about growing in their craft and calling. My name is Alex, fellow worship leader. Super stoked you're here. And if you're a new listener, I'm going to encourage you to hit that subscribe button because every single month, I'm going to give you helpful, practical guidance that you can immediately implement into your ministry. Hit that subscribe button and then go back through the past 9 years of episodes and binge listen your way to a healthier ministry. And if you're someone who is really serious about growing as a worship leader, I'm going to point you to the Worship Ministry Training Academy. What is the Academy? It's an online training platform that will give you everything you need to build a thriving worship ministry. You'll get 10 in-depth courses on topics like set building, team building, musical excellence, vocal technique, and more. You'll get live monthly training workshops on topics that are relevant to you. You'll get exclusive expert interviews with some of the best worship leaders in the world. You'll get done-for-you ministry admin systems and audition process, onboarding documents, team training materials, and even team discipleship materials. We will take care of you so you can focus on leading your team. If that sounds like something that would be of help to you, you can try the Worship Ministry Training Academy for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Sign up today for your $1 trial, and I hope to see you inside of the Academy. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hello, beautiful Worship Ministry Training family. It's so good to be with you. For those of you watching live, I see you all. I see Aaron, and I see Jeremy, and I see, who else? Nancy, Califia, gosh, Nathan. It's so great to have you guys joining us live for this awesome interview with my new friend, Patrick, who I'll introduce here in just a second. And if you're watching live in the Academy, we're going to be doing our Q&A session at the end. So make sure you're watching from YouTube so you can type your comments into the chat. But I'm so stoked to have Patrick Mayberry on the podcast today, and let's welcome him warmly right now as I bring him on screen. Hey, Patrick, how you doing? Guys, I love Patrick already because he's just fun, and he already used the word Sharknado in my conversation with him before we went live. So I'm like, dude, if anybody talks about Sharknado, they're definitely cool. So how you doing, Patrick?
Could there be anything more deadly?
Could there be anything more deadly than a Sharknado? I don't think so.
Top that in the chat.
Top that in the chat. Yeah, in the chat, let us know if there's anything more deadly than a Sharknado. Maybe the presence of God for a sinful person. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're come on. We're just oh yeah, you're right.
Sorry, I had to spin it theological.
Yeah, you took it there.
Okay, so for our listeners who may not know Patrick, hopefully they do, let me just kind of brag about you a little bit, Patrick. So Patrick is a signed singer-songwriter. He tours with people like Rend Collective, David Crowder. I mean, big names. His songs have been picked up by David Leonard, Mac Brock, North Point Worship. And my favorite song that you've written, Patrick, is called Holy Spirit Come. It has 1.3 million views on YouTube when I wrote these notes. I'm not sure if it's grown from there, but that's quite a bit of success that you have seen and that God has blessed you with. And yet you really struggled with insecurity, and you're very open on your biography on your label's website. You share just like you knew God was calling you to step out, and yet there was this insecurity in you, just like, I don't know if I can do what I feel God is asking me to do. And I can tell you, Patrick, so many worship leaders, including myself, we all face that constantly. Insecurity is a huge issue. So I just, first of all, wanted to say thank you for being real. Thank you for being authentic. Thank you for typing that up on your bio. And thank you for being willing to talk about it today for the Academy members and those who are going to listen after the fact. So I don't know, do you want to say anything before we get into really digging into that topic?
No, I'm so pumped, and I am wherever I am on my journey. And so it's been a blast / not a blast, just following the Lord into an unknown new season. And so I'm just pumped to share. And I don't know much, but anything I know, I will tell anyone.
I love that. I love you seem just like a genuine and humble human being, which I love. And I love seeing that. And you would think that everybody in the body of Christ is like that, but unfortunately that's not always the case. But I'd love, Patrick, just maybe take us a little bit back to the beginning of that journey. You're a worship leader at what, Soul City Church or something in Chicago, right?
Yep.
And you feel God is putting something on your heart to step out into an unknown season. Can you tell us about that call or that sense of call? And then also talk about a little bit of the hesitancy and why you felt hesitant.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really long story. And To be brief, I feel like the Lord has uniquely created each one of us, and our stories are so important, kind of where we've been, where we are, and I think they're like the Lord wants to use all that for where we're going. And I grew up in a kind of in and out of church, and the church that I grew up in was no music. Instruments were highly illegal in the church. So I didn't know anything about Christian music at all. I didn't know anything about worship music. I missed out on everything. The hot thing in my world was like classic rock and 90s country. And so I didn't discover anything about worship music until I was later in college. I kind of got taken to a passion conference in Atlanta, and that's where really my first experience was like, oh wow, this is very different than anything I've experienced. And it's funny, there was actually a journey for a while where I had to figure out, like, I had to like reconcile, is this like biblically correct? And that's all a whole nother story. But the Lord like used music to kind of lure me in. And I was just like, the hook was set so deep, and I was obsessed. And I was like, I felt like at that moment, the Lord was like, dude, you could keep, I was kind of playing in some other bands and like more just like rock and roll bands. And I felt like the Lord was like, you could keep doing that. Or what if you use music to build my church? And I just became obsessed. And so fast forward, that I ended up, my talent far outweighed my character and my, definitely my understanding of worship. So that kind of got me maybe in some positions I didn't need to be in quite yet, but some leaders who kind of were like, hey, you should try leading here. And I'm like, oh, what does that mean? So really grateful for those opportunities though. But, you know, over the next, I guess, 15 or 20 years, I just was leading worship at college ministry and then led on to my church and eventually going on to staff, and which kind of led my wife and I to Chicago to be a part of a newer church that was starting in the city in Chicago, and had really always had a heart for writing songs and just felt very natural of like, well, why don't we write songs for our little church or our college ministry at the time? And like, you know, our pastor's teaching on this thing, well, we should write a song about it. Or this person in our small group is walking through a really tough time. Let's write a song that could encourage them or help point them back to the truth of God. And so that's kind of always been my passion. And then fast forward, I'd been in Chicago for about 4 or 5 years and I'd just been writing a lot of songs. And, you know, I would make up these little demos to share with the band so they could learn, like, here's what I kind of want the drums to sound like. And a friend of mine ended up sharing those with a label that was based out of Franklin, Tennessee, where I live now. And that kind of began this relationship of, you know, what if you started partnering with us writing songs? And that was such an experience to just learn more about songwriting and a lot of co-writing and getting the chance to write with other really talented people. But just constantly always carrying this heart for like, I want to write songs for my church. And I feel like that's the greatest target, is if you're a young writer or you're trying to write songs, like write songs, don't write songs for the church, write songs for your church, and trust God if those ever make it out of your four walls. But I feel like that we're in a little weird spot right now just with the music industry and worship where we're trying to write these massive songs that could go across the globe, which is amazing. But I think that the Lord has kind of planted us where we are for a reason. And so I've always wanted to write songs for my local body. So that's kind of a real quick snapshot of my story. So what was the second part of the question?
I mean, like as you felt this shift, because I think what happens is anytime someone feels God calling them into something, opposition comes. Like when God says go, the enemy goes no. Right? Oh, that was kind of catchy, wasn't it? But so I feel like there's something that happens, and I bet you it happened with you as well, where you're like, wow, God is stirring in my heart. He's opening doors. He's giving opportunity, but I'm not sure I'm good enough. I'm not sure I'm qualified. Yeah. So what was that like for you as a worship pastor, worship leader, turning into a songwriter / artist? What were the insecurities, and how did that kind of come against you?
Yeah. So I didn't struggle with disqualification. I majorly struggled with unqualification. And a lot of that was just it was just a journey, and it was God showing me what didn't need to be true about me, like what didn't matter, what he didn't care about, what he wasn't concerned about, and what did matter to him. And so, I'm on this journey where I felt God inviting me to step out, and I'm like, Lord, but like, what does that even mean? Like, who am I? Like, it's all identity. Like, it's 100% identity. And so I feel like the last kind of 4-ish years of this journey, I feel like it's God just been like dealing with some serious identity issues that I've had about myself, and that honestly I've probably had about him, and this father-son relationship. And I remember specifically being at a writing retreat, which this was a group of friends in Atlanta, and they'd pulled together all these amazing writers and worship leaders. And we were sitting in the living room one morning, kind of before the day was getting started, and we were just doing like a big like breakfast and worship time. And I remember sitting there. It was the last day of this little writing trip. I'd been there maybe 3 days, and I had a lot of this stirring in me, feeling like God was calling me, like maybe like I need to start like, I've got something to say that God uniquely wants to use me to say, or my experiences, or how could I write songs for people like me to maybe see that, God in a different way. And I remember sitting there, and we were kind of getting ready for this worship time, and I had this overwhelming like thing that happened where I looked at the guy who was kind of tuning his guitar, and these are all people that we would all be like, oh yeah, I get that. That makes sense. But I'm not going to share names, but I'm like, I can't sing like that guy. This guy over here, he came up in this ministry that has been putting out music forever, and we all know and love. That person over there is just the most amazing anointed worship leader ever. That girl over there wrote this massive song that every church in the world is singing. And I just felt so overwhelmed. It was like it happened so fast. And I just remember going, I don't belong here. I don't belong here at all. I haven't been doing this. I didn't grow up in church, especially a church that had instruments. I didn't come up in a ministry. I didn't go to music school. I am still like, there was just so many things like that I quickly just went like, like, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not. And I felt like just as quickly as all that happened, I felt the Lord say, dude, the only reason you belong here is because you're mine. And it shifted everything for me. And that was kind of the start. And that didn't solve all my problems. That was the start of like an unraveling that's been going on like the last 4 years of this identity piece of me realizing it has nothing to do with what I can do. It has everything to do with who I belong to. And I think like, so often in this weird world we're in of like church is getting really like polished, and we're listening to these worship albums that just sound amazing, and then we're trying to mimic that on a Sunday, and a lot of times with a volunteer group of players. And you can just get real down on yourself in comparison, and like just feel like a big old fraud. And you're like, man, I'm never enough. And I feel like that's something that I'm probably going to keep carrying with me for a long time. But I feel like the Lord is like teaching me like it's way less about that, and it's way more about who you are and who I am, and that kind of relationship and how that works. And so, in our journey, when we first kind of decided to make a move out of Chicago and move to Tennessee and really kind of pursue this thing, this was still very real and raw, all these feelings of like unqualified. And I felt like the Lord was like kind of the story where the disciples see Jesus walking out on the water, and Peter's like, "If it's you, Lord, tell me to come." And he's like, "All right, come on out." And Peter starts walking on water, and then he, sees the waves and takes his eyes off Jesus and falls. I felt like my story, like I kind of interpreted as like the Lord was like, "All right, I'm inviting you to get out of the boat and walk this way." And I felt like I had 1,000 excuses to be like, "Well, Lord, I can't swim that good. Like, I can't swim like Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer. I can't sing like this guy over here. I'm not doing that. I'm not in this massive ministry." And I felt like the Lord was like, "Dude, I didn't ask you if you could swim. I didn't ask if you could sing. I just said, come and fix your eyes on me." And so, again, that was like the identity piece of trusting that God was calling me into something, believing that I was his kid, and believing that he was my father who actually really loves me and cares about me. And so, even when I'm still putting out music and stuff, and even when I'm leading worship, like I try to remind myself, like, obviously I want to prepare and I want to be really intentional and pray through and ask God how our time should look and what songs we should sing. But at the end of the day, like, I found myself trying to care way less about how I sound, or if I, mess up something, and I just care more about like the anointing of God. And were people invited to worship? Did I just get up there and try to perform a bunch of songs, or did I truly try to create on-ramps for people to kind of, in a hospitable way, like engage in worship? Because that's all we're called to do as worship leaders. Like, we're called to create spaces for people to lead worship. And so it's funny, I'm really bad when I get like invited to come lead worship somewhere. I've had this happen a few times. I'll like lead worship and then I'll get done. And then people, like one person or whatever, will come up to me afterwards and be like, "Dude, why didn't you lead your song? Why didn't you sing Holy Spirit Come or this song?" And I'm like, well, nobody knows those songs. So, and not hear me, I don't mean this in a self-deprecating way, but at times I will, but it's like, I want to lead a song that there's a 99% chance everybody in this room has heard before, so that we can I can serve the people. And I get it. There's the whole conversation on singing a new song and teaching people. And I believe, I'm not discrediting any of that, but I just want to hospitably serve people really well. And so I'm getting more of a confidence in a lot of that, and uniquely what God has called me to do as I'm kind of walking out being a worship leader, songwriter thing.
Oh my gosh, dude, there's so much gold there that I want the listeners to go back and listen to. There's so many directions we could go in this conversation, but I just want to highlight a couple things. First of all, just a very small highlight at the end where you talked about it's about inviting, not impressing. That is like the key to being a great worship leader, is that hospitality and caring more about the room than how you sound on stage. And there was a new kid coming onto our worship team in the last week or so, and he was nervous, and I told him, "No one cares about you." And I said it in a kind of mean but loving way, like, no one's here for us. Literally, they are not looking at us because they care about us. They're looking at us because the lyrics are behind our head. Like, that's the only reason they're looking in our direction, right? So that's a little side tangent, but the identity piece, I want to go into that because what you're sharing is like the number one way insecurity creeps up is by comparison. It's like looking at how you compare or how you stack up to everyone else, where you're saying God's not asking you to be everyone else. He's asking you just to be his son or his daughter. And so, oh man, I'm like, where do we go with this conversation? Because I mean, do you have any more thoughts that you want to share based on that before I ask questions?
Well, yeah, I will just say it's still really hard though. I'm a dad myself. So I had never been on tour before, and I got to go out on tour this last summer, and it was with Crowder and We the Kingdom. So it was really fun and just an amazing experience. But I remember my kids came to see their first show, and our youngest is 6, and he it's so cool when your family comes because they all get the like lanyards that make them look like they're legit, like in Wayne's World. It's like we're cool, we can go.
That's funny.
And I remember my son like lost his in like 5 seconds or something. But I remember I was following him backstage, and there was a security guard like like standing like there, keeping the door. And my 6-year-old son was just bolting through all the people and just like turned up and just sprinted up the ramp, like right past the security guard, like, yeah, whatever. I don't, and I was following him like 10 or 15 steps behind. And I had this moment where I felt like the Lord teaches me so much through my kids. I felt like the Lord was I'm like, dude, my son's name's Crosby. I'm like, Crosby, you don't have a badge on. That security guard is going to arrest you. Like, you can't just be running around. And I felt like the Lord was like, he's running around like he owns the place because his dad is on the stage singing and the people are here to see his dad. And I felt like the Lord was like, why don't you do that with me? You're my kid. Like, you've got the VIP badge on. Like, you've got it written on your heart. So start walking around the place like you own the place. Like, not arrogantly, but just owning this calling that God has called me into. And I felt like the Lord just gently was like, I still struggle with this. Like, and here's the deal. Anybody wants to just be chosen. And that's it. Like, any young worship leader, any old worship leader, we just want to all be chosen. We want to get up there on stage, and we want to sound good, and we want to play good. And if there's anyone that matters in our life sitting out in the congregation, at the end of the day, we want them to be like, yeah, you did a great job. Like, who doesn't want that? Like, so it's a real battle of like this affirmation, but at the end of the day, like, there's a little boy in me who just wants to know that he's going to get chosen. And I feel like that's what the Lord's been teaching me. It's like, I chose you, and I'm still going to choose you. But oh, buddy, like, I can remember, like, I live in Nashville. So let's say I'm at church on Sunday. I'm actually leading this Sunday. Let's say Chris Tomlin's there, or someone crazy like Phil Wickham's there. 3,000%. There's something in me that would want them to be like, afterwards, dude, you did an awesome job, or you're so talented. It's like, you're crazy if you don't want that affirmation. We're humans, and we respect those people, and I look up to those people. So to get affirmation from someone you respect, and that's awesome. So it's this weird balance, man, of like, and I don't have it figured out. This is kind of where I am right now today. I don't know. I'm just trying to care way less and just trust God.
Yeah, that's good. And I think with looking for affirmation from people, like you said, we all naturally want that. But then, like, realizing that our affirmation comes from the creator of the entire universe. And it's like, okay, a person who used to once wear a diaper versus like the creator of the heavens and the earth, like, whose opinion do I actually care about? And it's like, once you kind of put a human being in perspective of like, they once wore a diaper and they'll probably wear a diaper when they're old, and then they'll be in the dirt. It's like, well, they don't really matter that much, do they?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why I'm fixated on diapers today. I do not have small children in my house anymore, but there's a phrase that God has been putting in my head as you're speaking, and I don't know if it's because I'm reading a lot about the conquest of the promised land, but the phrase is like, when God gives you a space, nothing can take it away, and it's kind of just like, I'm owning this because this is mine. Like, God gave this to me, and like, whatever is happening around the promised land, it doesn't matter. This is mine, and I'm going to step into this. I do have a question, because something you said small in the beginning of the conversation was you were just making demos. You were just being faithful. You were just trying to serve your local church, and those demos somehow got to someone else's hands, and a door opened for you naturally. You didn't try to force it. I would love to hear how you knew God was calling you? Because that's a big question that people wrestle with, is like, is this me? Is this my desires? Or like, how do I know God is the one calling? Do you have any thoughts about that as you think back on that?
Yeah, obviously I'm a big believer in faithfulness is way more important than like fruitfulness. And so I've always tried to just like trust that God actually really cares about my life, and he cares about this interview. He cares about me walking my kids to school this morning. He cares about whatever we're going to do this afternoon. And so I'm learning to trust and trust and trust more and more that God actually cares about my life, so that wherever he has me, I just want to be really faithful because I'm there for a reason. This is where he wants me. And so I don't know, like, just, this is not a new statement, but like being faithful where you are, or faithful where you're planted. And I think that's so crucial. And I think that I just think God likes that. And this is where I can like struggle with feeling like a fraud, because I'm not a perfect person at all. But it's like I try to do really hard, wholehearted work wherever I am. And so and love people well, and just be kind to people, and have a whole lot of fun doing it. So I think that was kind of our season in Chicago, and like, and I think God opened this new door, and we prayed a lot, and really asked for a lot of confirmation, and felt like the Lord was like inviting us to step out into this new journey. And I just think like especially for like young people in ministry, or young people like in worship ministry, like just like be so faithful right where you are, and just crush it. Like crush it. And like know that you're there because God wants you there. And I have to remind myself, one time I was at this writing retreat, and I remember like in the morning, this dude who kind of was running the whole thing, he would kind of divide the groups up for the day and be like, okay, you three people over there, you three people over there. And like the first day I got put in these groups with just these like awesome people, like just, I'm like, what in the world? This is crazy. And then the next day I got put in like groups with like it sounds awful. They just were like very new writers, had never really written songs before. And then like the third day or something, I'm like, I was down on myself, thinking like they put me with those people because they don't think I'm good enough. Like the Lord is doing work in me. But I remember like kind of sitting quietly, and the Lord was like, do you not trust me? Do you think that guy who's splitting up the groups knows more than I know, especially about the music that my church is singing? And I feel like that's a huge thing for me. Like the day I learned that God cares way more about worship music than I do, or the music industry does, like this is the music of his church, so he cares about it. And I felt like the Lord was like, the group that I put you in is the group I want you in.
Wow.
And so even like with my publishers, like I felt like the Lord was like, I'm your publisher. They are there to help you, but I'm your publisher. I am your whatever. Like the Lord is just like, just trust me, man. Like, and I feel like, even I'm still in seasons where I'm like, I believe that I can trust the Lord, but I still am a real human who faces scary things and life decisions. And I'm like, Lord, okay. Like, are you still here? Are you still in this? Did I make a wrong turn or something? But I feel like God is just inviting me more and more and more to just keep trusting him. And even when I'm leading worship, like trusting him when I'm leading worship, like I said, being so prepared, but also trying to create space for trust.
Yeah. This all comes down to faith, really. It's like, God, you've called me, you've placed me. It's all from you. It's all to you. It's all for you. It couldn't be any other way. I'm not like super like dogmatic about Calvinism or Arminianism or whatever. Like, I believe there's a balance and we don't fully understand it personally. But like, more and more as I get older and I watch God unfold his story in my life, I'm like, it couldn't be any other way. Like, I am exactly where he has me, and there's kind of no other alternative. It's like he just put me here. And same with you, I'm sure. And I want to ask you this one question before we move into our Academy Q&A time. And that is, like, I had a couple people in the Academy in the last couple weeks who just joined recently, and they both don't sing or play anything, but their churches appointed them to be the leader, the worship leader or the choir director.
Let's
And
go.
they're like, are you sure? Like, one girl was like, I'm joining because they put me in charge. And I'm like, do you want to be in charge? She's like, not really. So like you said just a few minutes ago, God does not make mistakes in where he places people. He sovereignly chose to place every single worship leader listening to this exactly where he has you. And he did not make a mistake in choosing you. So how would you encourage, counsel, shepherd the worship leaders listening who feel unqualified or underqualified? What words of encouragement do you have for them?
Yeah, I would say that to like an extent, you're always going to be unqualified and stay unqualified. Like stay there. That's a good spot to be because that means you need someone else to come through for you. And so I just feel like that invites at every turn opportunities for you to trust the Lord more. And I do think that God doesn't make mistakes. And if you can't play or sing, but you're looking after a community of worshipers, and you're helping like faithfully on Sundays, create a space. That's what I always said to my team. I was like, on Sundays, I'm like, we do our midweek rehearsals, and I was like, guys, we get to create a space for people to like connect with Jesus. And so, we did that through music, but the host team did it through greeting people and saying hi and helping them find a seat. And the production team did it through, all the magic that they do. And, the pastor did it through the message. So I would just say, like, look for and ask God, what are the things you're specifically wired for and that you're really good at? Like, my wife and I, we kind of have like a high gift of hospitality, and not like we're like we like make our house look cool and have people over. Like, not that. I'm just saying we have like a high, like, sixth sense, seventh sense, whatever one more, sixth sense, just to like try to make people feel welcome wherever they are. And we just like are always kind of scanning the room for like, okay, who's someone that like needs a friend, or is like, how could we connect them with someone else, and just trying to like disarm a room, because I feel like that's how you can bring people together. And so, I for the longest time, I'm like, how do I use that in worship? How do I be hospitable in worship? And how do I make sure the person on the back row who feels like they don't belong here, but they're here because their ex-wife's coworker invited them or something, and they're like, I don't belong in church. And I'm like, no, you do. And I want to figure out how to make you feel welcome here. And so just asking the Lord to like show you different ways that you can use your giftings. And so, for you had mentioned the people who they don't sing or play an instrument. I'm like, that's awesome. Maybe you won't get caught up in the head games of like, did I sound good? And so you could be such a gift to the people who are on the like platform singing and playing, and you get to kind of have this like eagle eye over the whole experience and view like, are people engaging? Why aren't they engaging? Oh, maybe because the volume's too quiet, or maybe the volume's too loud, and the vocal sounds funny because of this, or the lights are weird, and maybe we don't need lights at all. Maybe we just need to turn all the lights on, and you get to create, like, you're almost the shepherd of of the worship experience and the worship team. And you get to pray for the young drummer who is first time playing, and you see this thing in him. And I just feel like it's kind of asking God how you've uniquely wired yourself, and then how does that flesh itself out? And it doesn't have to look one way. However you grew up, it doesn't have to look that way. The churches you're watching, it doesn't have to look like that. And I feel like that's been like the best thing for me. Like, but also I will say exposure to the way other churches are doing it is really helpful. Just to be like, oh, there isn't one way. Like, this church does it like this church does it like this. They're very different, but they're working really well for both of their contexts. So what does it look like for our context?
Yeah.
I don't think the person who is on the microphone leading every Sunday has to be the leader. I think that's like, that doesn't hold up. I think there can be a myriad of variations of how it looks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for all those thoughts. Okay, so this episode will be releasing in May. You are going on tour in May. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, well, as I set you up for this question, I also want you to be thinking about this one last question, which is, do you have any final thoughts based on identity and how it fights against insecurity? So just kind of in the back of your mind. But tell people where to go to get tickets for your tour. You just recently released a project called Easy to Praise.
Yep.
It's a single. So tell people a little bit about the single, tell them about the tour, and where they can get tickets. And I'll make sure to put links in the show notes for all that.
So yeah, I've been working on a new album. The album comes out later this year, and nobody cares. I'll just tell you what it's called. My label will be like, no, but it's actually called Wild Faith. And it's about a song called Wild Faith that is kind of all about this journey that I've been on these last couple of years, and all these songs. There's actually a song that is an identity song, and kind of me, kind of like, all of this conversation and what I'm not this, but I'm actually this. And I'm so excited. So Easy to Praise was the first single that came out of all of these. There's actually another song that comes out this week. So I guess when people hear this, that one will already be out. So yeah, I'm super excited. I feel like I'm really believe in a lot of these songs. I believe in all of them. And I feel like the Lord is like, they are Ebenezer's for this last season. And I'm so grateful that I've gotten to work on them. And I'm so excited that I've gotten to record them and that they're going to get to come out. And my prayer is that there'll be pieces of truth that will kind of just trickle out into a weird, broken world. And I hope they'll encourage people and point people back to Jesus. And so, yeah, so the tour, I'm going out with the Wren Collective, which I'm so excited. And I think you can find tickets on my website or Wren Collective's website. It's just Patrick Mayberry Music, and be talking about it on all the social media things, and super excited.
Yeah, and just for the listeners, if you have not yet introduced Patrick's song, Holy Spirit Come, in your church, it is a banger. It rocks, and it's worshipful, and it's easy to sing. It's congregational. It's a win. It's a massive win for you, for your team, and for your church. So definitely check that song out if you guys haven't been singing it for your church. But Patrick, last final words for the general public about identity versus insecurity, and then we'll move into our Academy Q&A.
Yeah, have grace with yourself, and like almost think of it as like it's playful. Like, play with the idea of like, okay, what if my perfection doesn't matter? What if my credit sheet doesn't matter? What if my number of followers doesn't matter? What if this song doesn't matter? What if all that matters is that the God of the universe calls me his, and he uniquely created me and he knows me? And I'm not saying like you can say that to yourself and you're going to be fixed. That's not it. But what if you just had grace with yourself and played with that idea and dug more into your identity as a son or a daughter of the King of Kings. And I'm going on like of really honing in on this journey. It's like year 4 for me, and I imagine I'm going to continue this journey for the next 9,000 years until I'm with Jesus in eternity. But it's way less about you than you think, but it's also a whole lot about you too, because God created you and he loves you and he created you for himself. So it's this funny world of like, it's not about you, but it actually is about you. Yeah. But it's also about Jesus, and it's more about your relationship together. So yeah.
Man. Yeah, that really just last thought reminds me of Ephesians 2:10, which is we are Christ's workmanship. That word workmanship is carefully crafted work of art. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, that we might walk in them, which he prepared for us in advance. I think I mixed up the order there, but basically, like, he made each one of us for a specific purpose, to occupy a specific amount of territory and space. He designated it, he pre-planned it, and our job is just to step into that. So, Patrick, thank you. This has been amazing. For the Academy members, hold tight. We're going to jump live into our live Q&A in 1 second. For the rest of the listeners, God bless you guys. Please subscribe, like, follow, share this out to the world, because we want to share the amazing advice that Patrick shared with us today. So let's jump into our Academy Q&A. Hold tight, guys. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope this episode encouraged you, helped you, and pushed you forward in your ministry. If it helped you, can you take a second and help us by sending it to just one person that you think needs to hear this? And if you're feeling extra nice, leave us a nice, shiny 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or like this video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you want to discuss this episode or ask questions, we do have a free section in our Academy where you can post comments and questions and chat with other worship leaders just like you, and also sample some of our courses. And you can go to worshipministrytraining.com/free to join us inside the free portion of the Academy. If you're looking for more, check out the Full Access Academy. You can get 15 days for just $1 to start and try things out. Again, you can try all of it for 15 days for just $1 by going to worshipministrytraining.com. Hope to see you inside the Academy, or else I'll see you next month for another helpful episode.